Hi everyone and welcome for another Apitherapy video. This time we'll be talking about the cells in a beehive, the honeycomb itself. The shape of it first. It's hexagonal, it's kind of hexagonal tubes that are placed. I will show you right away. This is just a little sample of honeycomb. Well, there's no honey in it, but just the cells themselves, the structure of the honeycomb, of the comb itself. It's fascinating how it's made. So this is just a small piece. Obviously, you see this is how the normal exterior part of it, like the border of the comb itself. This here, it was attached here to wood on the top here. So it's just a small piece. Usually that would be bigger, and there are actually many of those, and like they are placed like this, one after the other, either if it's in a beehive itself made by humans, or even if it's in any cavity in nature. They do just the same. They build comb just like that. This has been built by bees themselves. So you see, there are cells on two sides. Cells are open here, and cells are open here as well. I'm gonna put this a bit closer so you can see. Hope you see well in the video. So you see cells open on both sides. That means that in the middle, there's kind of a sheet of wax. It's not an actual sheet, it's the bees that made this, but it's the same wall of wax in the middle, very thin, that is used for both sides of those cells. So this is quite interesting how they do this. So there's opening on both sides and a wall of wax in the middle. What is interesting? The shape of it. You see it's hexagonal, and you see also that those hexagonals they have the top and the bottom is not a side of the hexagon. It's actually a point of that hexagon. You see that? And also, I don't know how well you see this, but there's actually some angle to those hexagonal tubes that are built. It's not absolutely horizontal, because that would be just like this, like that is, it's exactly how that would be in a beehive, standing like this, attached to wood usually. So those hexagonal tubes are kind of hexagonal, but not exactly. There's actually some angle. They're going like this, upwards towards the exterior on that side, and same thing on that side. It's going upwards as well. So this is very practical. Why is there that angle in those hexagonal tubes, those cells forming the comb? Very basic. They have to put honey in this. And honey comes from nectar first, which is quite liquid. So they don't want the liquid, if the angle will go down, well, of course, the liquid would just flow out of the cell, because that nectar will actually evaporate a little bit, and then it will turn into honey and will be thicker, and then it will stick in the cell. But at first, it's more liquid. So that's why they need that angle. So I just showed you how are made those beeswax honeycomb, and that's how the bees built it themselves. So you see, that have been done naturally. So you see that those hexagonal shape, they build it this way. The bees did this, sometimes beekeepers, they actually use beeswax sheet with hexagonal shape already printed on them. And you could think, oh, well, they make hexagons because humans make those hexagons. But no, this has been made 100% by bees themselves, and we see those hexagons exactly on it. So we understand how those cells are made. So hexagonal tubes that are going a little bit upward, going to the exterior of that comb piece, and it's going upwards on both sides. Just a little bit, just a few degrees of angle there. So they are made exactly like this, and there's a point of that hexagon pointing down and up. It's not a side making the base of it in a beehive. That's how it's made. So you see, you have a clear understanding of this. So now let's have a look at the symbolic aspect of those cells in honeycomb. So An hexagon is formed of two triangles. That's usually symbolically how we describe the hexagon. There's one triangle going upward, and that forms that point on top of the hexagon. And there's another triangle going downward, and that forms the point going down at the very bottom of that hexagon. So we have two principles, one going up, one going down, and they're made by triangles. So one would represent, let's say, the spirit, or the heaven as going down and giving life to matter, to earth, let's say. Very often we understand, well, yeah, there's life coming down, and when our spirit, our soul, or life just is departing from our body, well, then the body stays there, but that life is gone, and that body now is not alive anymore. So we usually people will understand this, that there's some kind of life that is coming down from heaven. And on the other side, that other triangle, it's the life on earth that wants to reach a specific state, wants to reach heaven, let's say. When we think, oh, when I'll eventually pass away and die, well, I want to go in heaven or something. Or sometimes it's people meditating. They want to reach, really illumination, like high level of consciousness. It's that same triangle pointing upward. So we have both of those are put in together in the hexagon, and they create those hexagonal tubes. And what are those hexagonal tubes? For the bees, very practical. Well, that's where they store the nectar and they transform it into honey. That's where they store the pollen and they transform it into bee bread. And that's also where the queen bee is laying the eggs. And that's where the eggs are having their full metamorphosis and will actually hatch out from those same hexagonal tubes, those cells. They will hatch out of those as adult bees. The entire metamorphosis is totally completed in those cells. So they're quite fascinating. There's lots of transformation happening there. The nectar will be turned into honey, the pollen will be turned into bee bread, and the egg will be turned into an adult bee in those cells. So they're quite amazing. So those two principles of those two triangles, why are they there? I will just explain one thing, which I think is very inspiring. That angle of those cells, pointing upward. It shows us that those recipients, because that's what they are, those cells, they receive eggs, they receive nectar, and they receive pollen. So those recipients they are receiving from something upward. And it shows us that what goes in those cells come from up there, symbolically from the sunrise energy, because it's pointing upward, but not so much. It's not like vertical. If it would be pointing up vertically, then it would be like, like noon sun, pointing down. But no, it's not. It's more like, sunrise energy that is flowing in. And on the other side, because there are two sides, right? There's those cells pointing on two sides. Some are opened that side and some are open that side. Remember that wall in the middle that separates those two sides on every single comb? That's how it's made. So from one side, symbolically, it's pointing east, let's say eastwards or southwards, which is pointing towards the sunrise. And the other ones pointing westward would be more pointing towards the sunset, or symbolically the actually night sky, where we see all the stars and all this. So that shows us that everything going in the cells are coming from above. And that shows us it's actually that triangle pointing down that is coming in. And by the way, that's exactly how it's happening. The bees are actually flying out of the beehive, and they come back flying from the sky. And that's how they bring the pollen and the nectar in the hive. Exactly like that. They fly from above and they bring it down, and then they go and they put it in those cells. That's how it's happening. So that angle means something. It tells us that, at every single time of the day, may it be daytime, symbolized by that angle pointing towards sunrise, showing us daytime, and even at nighttime when it's pointing towards the other side where it's more like sunset and also like the night sky with the stars. Well, there's good energy from heaven, from the sky, coming down, pouring on us actually. And that's what the bees collect, and they bring it from up above. You'll tell me, of course, no. That connection symbolically is, is not true. It's something very practical. It's because that liquid, that nectar, needs to stay in, so that's why they angle it like this. Yes, you're right. In the meantime, symbols are there all the time, and it's just showing us how the symbolical aspect of life and the physical, practical aspect of life are just interconnected at all time. So both are true, actually. That's what is so nice about it. It's that it's true. That's how nature works. Nature gives the best symbols of all because she is true. Nature is just wonderful, and it is actually true in all different aspects. Okay, so that's for those angles, and now we really have an understanding that yes, its energy is coming from up above. That angles is showing us that is actually being collected in those hexagonal tubes that are the cells of the honeycomb. May it be pollen, nectar, or whatever else. It's all that there is with the eggs. So they do it like that. And then if we have a look at the other triangle symbolically that forms that hexagon, it's all the transformation happening in the cells. For the nectar, it's being transformed into honey. And that's very easy to understand why it's that triangle going up, because that nectar has too much water content. It has to evaporate somehow. That's why the bees are ventilating the beehive in the summertime to get some of that water out, also to cool off the beehive sometimes, but mainly to ventilate some of that water out of the beehive and maintain the right moisture level in the beehive. And so they actually ventilate that water content out. And when you have some nectar in a cell like this, well, of course, when the water content from it is evaporating, it's going up. So it's that triangle going upward. So that transformation is showing us clearly that symbolical triangle of that hexagon is actually going upwards. And with the pollen, same thing, there's a transformation happening. It's being transformed into bee bread. Basically, the bees will actually inoculate the pollen with their saliva, and some fermentation will be happening. It's a good fermentation, which is actually amplifying the nutritional value of that pollen, and will mainly also allow it to be preserved for really long periods of time. So that fermentation, same thing, it's the same triangle pointing upwards, and the same thing with that egg that is pointing upwards, and we see the same thing there. That egg is in the cell, and through metamorphosis at the very end, the bee ends up being mature, and what is up? The head of the bee. So we see that yes, it's pointing upwards, and then that bee that is adult there's actually a capping on top of it with his mandible will actually creates a hole, some opening, will open that cell and will hatch out upwards. So we see it's that triangle. All the transformation in the cell is connected with that triangle going upwards. And even the bees, when they collect the bee bread to feed to the babies, the bee bread is that transformed pollen, fermented pollen, let's say, in the hive. Well, the bees, the nurse bees will collect it, will take it and take it up, that triangle, pointing upwards, we'll take it up and then we'll feed it to the bees. And it's a more earthy triangle, not coming from the sky. It's forces on earth that allows this to be transformed like this. And it's showing that it's going upward. So this is fascinating how we can see those two triangles forming that hexagon in the cells. Symbolically, we can understand how that is happening, those principles, where they're working. This is just wonderful. And I hope that this helps you to understand that when we eat honeycomb, like honey in the comb itself, we're eating a honeycomb, we're connected to this, to those two principles. We see the shapes of the hexagons, we eat it like this. It's just fascinating. We're connecting to those two triangles, and that actually is reflected also in the human being. There are two triangles in human beings. Let's say there are three bodies of our higher nature, also three bodies of our lower nature. Usually, let's talk a bit about our lower nature, our physical body, emotional body, and mental body. Usually that's how we describe it. And that creates some kind of triangle too. And that triangle has to be equilateral in order to be able to create and be part of an hexagon. It has to be equilateral. Those two triangles, they have to be equilateral. So this way, they can form that hexagon. And that talks about bring some balance within ourselves as human beings between our physical strength, our will, our emotional life, and our intellectual capabilities, how to balance this and harmonize that. And then we're a really well balanced person, and we can use that triangle and do that transformation and all this, and also then combine with that higher triangle and create that hexagon in our own life. And so there's a lots of symbols there. I'll stop right here for today, but I hope that gives you more understanding of the honey. When we eat honey, it always comes from that comb. It's just wonderful if it's well preserved in between, and it keeps that energy, that vibration of that honeycomb. Well, you can feel how pure honey is and how it's connected to great symbols, how the bees are connected to wonderful forces of life through the work, and the healing aspect in apitherapy of honeycomb and pure honey is just, takes so much more sense. We know it's scientifically, but it takes so much more sense when we also understand the symbolical aspect of the work of bees. So that's another window on that understanding. I hope you appreciated it. Of course, share as much as you would like. I think it's some information, worth knowing for most people. So thank you very much for your appreciation, and see you another time for another Apitherapy video.